Oliver and Patricia Schmitz from Schönwalde are very happy.
It was and is our great love, and we're both equally crazy.
It felt great. It was just right.
And because it was right, they wanted to get married and have children. Ronja and Michael Spielmanns from Berlin also wanted children, but 53-year-old Michael had had a vasectomy 25 years ago.
For all those years, I thought that after such a long time it wouldn't work anymore.
The wedding guests had no idea about these worries. 6-year-old Tim and his father are very close. His parents from Jüterbog had to wait for a long time to have a family.
It took us 10 years to have the child we wanted.
3 couples with a desire to have children. These are their stories. Oliver and Patricia Schmitz met in 2006. They realized they belonged together, wanted to stay together, and wanted to have children.
To experience this life together with a child, to give it a good life and bring it up properly, would be the culmination of our relationship. Having a child after experiencing great love together is like starting life anew.
It becomes a part of ourselves.
They're both only children and had a very happy childhood themselves. They were planning a larger family together.
We wanted 2 children right from the start because we're both only children ourselves. I always wanted a sibling, and Ollie did too, so we definitely wanted 2 children.
4 years later, and despite their best efforts, the family wasn't taking shape in the way they had hoped. In summer 2010, they started developing serious doubts.
We tried for a long time, and we first thought it was because we were putting ourselves under a lot of pressure. Because you don't have an endless amount of time.
They sought help and went for a consultation at a fertility center in Berlin. They wanted to know what the problem was. Patricia Schmidt's biological clock was ticking. She was turning 35 in March 2011. Oliver was 30. They openly answered all of the questions put by the reproductive expert, Dr. Reinhard Hanner.
How many times a week are you intimate?
We try every day.
So that's not the problem. There are some who just do it to order or at a certain time during ovulation. I would suggest we talk about what kind of tests we can do. The tests on the man are easier than those on the woman because we just need a sperm sample.
A sperm test. The journey to having a child starts with separate tests. No togetherness here. Oliver Schmitz is tested first.
You hope the doctor will tell you to carry on trying because everything's fine. But you also start thinking about what would happen if you got a different diagnosis. But you do try to put that off.
The result of the semen analysis was sobering.
You can see the activity of the sperms here. When it's magnified 6,000 times, they look like little tadpoles. The sperm should have a healthy head and just a few of these vacuoles.
Vacuoles are small holes in the head, and most sperm have them.
Around 1% of your sperms are without these vacuoles. That's a very significant result.
That means his fertility was insufficient. A bitter realization for Oliver Schmitz.
Of course, I was shocked when I got the diagnosis. I thought about what would be next. I had to come to terms with it. It wasn't easy to hear that it wasn't working 100%. I didn't know what to say.
Das war eine sehr schwierige Antwort, die man da bekommen hat.
3 months later, his sperm was tested again. Maybe the first test was incorrect.
Of course, I hoped I would be told everything's fine, but I also thought about the alternative.
Trotzdem macht man sich Gedanken, was ist, wenn es nicht geht.
Again, the news was bad. Now it was Patrizia's turn to be tested. Things weren't ideal for a pregnancy for her either.
The one side of the uterus is thicker than the other, and this could indicate endometriosis.
After 4 years of dreaming and hoping, this diagnosis in June 2011 was a severe test for their great love.
We were glad to some extent that it was both of us. That made it a bit easier. But I never thought that I wasn't a full woman or that I had failed. And I never thought anything like that about him.
It was easier that we both contributed to the problem, because if only one of us was affected and the other was all right, that would have been tougher.
We're out with the investigators of the customs office. Michael Spielmans is one of them. When he told his friends and colleagues that he wanted a vasectomy, he received little sympathy for his decision. He was told contraception was a woman's issue.
I had a vasectomy 25 years ago. I was mocked a lot by my friends and family. They said I wasn't a man anymore because they didn't know that everything is just the same afterwards, except that the sperm goes a different way and dies. That's all.
He made this decision because
my wife had trouble with contraceptives. We opted for sterilization, and because it's an easier process in men. For women, it's an inpatient procedure, and they can't have babies afterwards. Whereas it was said at the time that it was reversible for men.
the young woman from next door was the reason he started thinking about a reversal 25 years later. Michael Spielmans had been divorced for 10 years. He bought himself a house. The two got to know each other better in July 2006. Ronja, 20 years his junior, turned the life of the customs officer upside down.
When I met Ronja, I didn't want more children, and I didn't want to live like a married man. But I really fell for her.
His neighbor was in love too.
I liked his brown eyes. They were nice and warm. I could be myself and say what I wanted. We could laugh together. It was what I had always been looking for.
Their love grew. They went to the seaside. It was their first holiday together. He had already told her about his vasectomy.
When we met, I put my cards on the table and told her I'd had a vasectomy because I didn't want to get her hopes up and then disappoint her.
This holiday in August 2007 was a turning point. Michael Spielmans started to dream. Having a family with Ronja would be a proper new beginning. But by that point, he had been sterilized for 25 years. Could such a procedure really be reversed, as he had been assured at the time?
When I was looking out to sea, I thought that I would go under the knife again for this woman because I loved her so much. I would have it reversed to give her children and please her. And there's the age gap too. And she loves me as much as I love her. So when I'm older and not around anymore, she'll have a child to remember me by.
He researched online for information about getting his vasectomy reversed.
For years, I thought that a reversal really wouldn't work so many years later.
25 years ago, Michael Spielmanns only got a vague explanation of what happened during a vasectomy. Today, it's possible to watch reversals online. During his research, he kept finding references to Professor Reinhard Oesterwitz from the Ernst von Behrmann Clinic in Potsdam. The urologist seemed to be very experienced and successful. Michael Spielmanns was undecided. Even if he had this operation and could become physically fertile again, there was no guarantee of a child. A difficult decision. Dorit, Thomas and Tim often have all their family around them. 3 generations live under one roof here, near Luckenwalde, south of Berlin. Tim's grandmother grew up with 11 siblings, as this picture from the 1960s shows. That's why when Dorit and Thomas met in 1996, it was natural for them to have children one day.
By 27, the time had come for children. I stopped taking the pill, and after a year and a half, nothing had happened. I suspected that there was a problem.
Tim's parents have been a couple for 16 years. They met as teenagers. Having their son 5 years ago is still the biggest gift of their life. That's because they've known since 1997 that Thomas is infertile.
I remember when my husband came home with the diagnosis. It was disappointing, but what was encouraging was that he said even a blind chicken sometimes finds a grain.
After 2 further unsuccessful years, it was clear they could only have a child together by opting for artificial insemination. To do that, Thomas would have to give sperm, and Dorit would have to inject herself with hormones, again and again.
Then the waiting began. We did that whole process 6 times, and it was incredibly draining emotionally.
6 artificial insemination attempts, 6 failures in just 3 years. A back and forth between high hopes and bitter disappointments between 1999 and 2002.
There was a period when I was very stressed emotionally. I couldn't look at prams and little babies anymore.
It wasn't until 10 years later that they got Tim, by a different route. November 2008. Ronja and Michael Spielmanns were in the office of Professor Reinhard Oesterwitz. They wanted to know how his vasectomy could be reversed and how likely it was that Michael could become fertile again.
The longer the vasectomy